Welcome to MOT Matters and VOSA's training centre here in Manchester. We thought in this edition we might do things a little differently.
That's right. Normally we concentrate on how to test correctly, but I'd like to think I've learned a bit making these films, so I'm going to have a go at doing some testing myself.
Having never qualified as a nominated tester, Robert, that should be interesting.
True, but at least I'll make some common mistakes, and that's what we're trying to help with here.
And I'll keep a beady eye on you to make sure you get it right.
Sounds like a plan.
Well, I've set up a vehicle, and although I must stress we're not doing a proper test, it should help to identify some commonly misinterpreted items.
How have you identified the common mistakes, Brian?
Well, we've asked our technical trainers, our vehicle examiners, we've gathered information from VOSA seminars, and there isn't time to cover every issue, so we're going to concentrate on the most common and those we get asked about the most.
Well, I've been swatting up on the inspection manual, but I hope you'll be gentle with me.
You got to get it right, Robert.
And no pressure then.
So we're here at the test vehicle, and Robert's just carrying out his pre-checks, which would normally include asking the necessary questions about engine condition in the case of a diesel. You finished, mate?
I have just finished, Brian. I've checked that all the doors open, the bonnet, the boot, the fuel filler cap. I've also checked that there's not so much stuff in the boot that I can't get to the testable items, and I've made a note of the mileage.
How about taking a note of the registration number and the VIN?
Oh, no need. I've got that on the job card.
Ah, now you've just fallen at the first hurdle there, Rob. The tester must gather the relevant information directly from the vehicle itself. That way, the correct information will be input into the VTS device. What's on your job card may not be correct, and that could lead to a false record being created on the system. Now, I appreciate this one says VOSA on it, but we do know the correct registration.
What about taking it from the V5C registration document? Because I'll always have that.
Now, that's another common misconception. There's absolutely no need to ask the presenter for the registration document unless the age of the vehicle's in question. And even then, the tester must gather the relevant information directly from the vehicle itself.
So I've not got off to a very good start, have I?
Nah, it's all a learning curve, mate. Let's go to the VTS device and register it for test.
OK. Well, we're all logged on, Brian. Do testers tend to make mistakes here?
Yeah, they do, and one of those concerns the maximum weight of Class 4 vehicles. Any ideas?
Well, casting my mind back, any Class 4 goods vehicle is up to 3,000 kilograms design gross weight.
Yeah, that's right.
So where's the problem?
Well, testers tend to understand the 3,000 kilogram limit for Class 4 goods vehicles, but they tend to forget that passenger vehicles in Class 4 can be any weight as long as they've not got more than 12 passenger seats.
I remember now, so minibuses and particularly large caravans can be any weight and still be a Class 4 as long as they don't have more than 12 passenger seats.
Yeah, that's right, but we have to remember that although they may be Class 4 vehicles, we would still have to decline to test if they were of such a size, weight or configuration that they couldn't be properly or safely tested using the approved facilities. OK,
and when registering a vehicle for test, the first thing it asks for is the registration number, but in the case of a recently imported vehicle, it might not be registered yet.
Yeah, that's not uncommon, but it's no problem. We just use the menus in the drop-down box to select the appropriate reason, which in this case would be not displayed.
OK, do you want to show us?
I'll show you that one. So if I look there, I've got a drop-down box, not required. So if I've got no registration mark, I'll select that. That's it.
So you don't want testers to write no registration in the box, you just want it left blank?
Yeah, that's really important because whatever you type into that box, the system will log that as the registration mark of the vehicle. And we end up with hundreds of vehicles with the same registration mark of no reg or whatever. Now let's look at the chassis number entry.
So what could go wrong there?
Well, again, if it doesn't have a VIN or you can't find one, just use the drop-down box to select the appropriate reason.
So not required if it's too old to need one and not found if you simply can't find one?
Yeah, that's correct. But remember that you must have a VIN to test an unregistered vehicle. And where you've entered a partial chassis number and been offered a match, then always make sure the information's correct. Don't just accept it on face value.
If there isn't an exact match, won't the system offer you the nearest match it can?
It may do. So again, before accepting the nearest match, then make sure all the details are correct, including make, model and registration number, before you accept it.
Well, that makes sense. What happens if I can't find the specific vehicle on VSI? Can I test without it?
Yeah, that's no problem. You simply abort VSI and the system will let you create a new test record, enter in the correct details. All right, now let's register the vehicle for test.
OK, let's do it.
OK, vehicle correctly registered for test, so let's go and test it. It should be interesting. Stop there, mate. That's your first mistake.
Oh, really? I'm just checking the seatbelt, Brian.
You can't do it properly from there. You've got to check that the webbing retracts fully with the seatbelt fastened and the seat unoccupied. So you've got to do it from outside the vehicle.
OK, good point. I've also noticed that this near side mirror is covered in tape, probably broken, so that would be a fail. I can tell by the way you're looking at me that it's not.
Perceptive as ever, Robert. How many mirrors fitted?
3. Inside and two door mirrors, one of which covered in tape.
Right, we can only fail obligatory mirrors, and this vehicle only requires 2 mirrors, an offside exterior mirror of any one of the others. So that's a pass and advise.
So mirrors that are in addition to the obligatory ones aren't testable?
Yeah, correct, spot on.
OK, so I'll carry on with the test. OK, I'm done in here. Round to the front, and I need an assistant in the vehicle?
You don't need an assistant for the headlight aim, Rob, but you will need one later.
OK, and I put the headlamp adjuster to 0 for the headlamp aim test?
Nah, no need to touch that, mate. The manual says test as presented. But if we had a situation where the headlight beam was too low to the extent it'll warrant a failure, we would then come back and check that, and then, if necessary, wind it up to its highest point and recheck the headlight aim.
So we leave this as it is unless there's a problem?
Spot on, mate. Let's move on, shall we?
Can you help me with lining this up, Brian? Because I'm not exactly sure how it works.
Well, you've just highlighted one very important aspect of using headlight aim equipment, Rob. Make sure you're familiar with the operating instructions and correctly align the equipment to both the vehicle, including checking that you're the right distance from the headlight tester, and to the headlight being tested.
Fair enough. So where do we start?
Right, first of all, we've got to align the beam setter to the vehicle, and I've put 2 markers on here to make it clearer for the film.
Oh, look at this, Brian. That's a bit dodgy. Is that a fail?
Well, before you fail it, did it clear that windscreen effectively when you did the checks from the driver's seat?
Oh, and now you mention it, it did.
Well, there's no reason to fail it. Same principle would apply if it were a block washer jet.
So as long as one of the other jets is providing enough liquid to the screen to clear it, that would be OK?
Yeah, we'd simply pass and advise.
Now, Brian, I can see that the centre lap belt is missing on this vehicle, but I seem to remember that's not necessarily a reason for failure.
Yeah, you're right, Rob. While every seatbelt fitted needs to be tested and must be in good condition, not every seat needs to be fitted with a seatbelt.
Can we lift the seat to see if it's there?
We can check that it simply hasn't slipped under the seat, as lap belts often do, and providing no tools are required, yeah, we can just lift the seat and have a look.
OK, let's do that. Oh, yeah, it is here. What if we hadn't found it, Brian?
Well, what we'd need to do then is to check the flowcharts in section 5.1 of the manual to determine the minimum seatbelt requirements for this vehicle before we make our decision.
OK, let's test it as it's here.
He's missed something. Did you spot it? I'll tell him later.
So, Brian, a couple of things here. One, we've got a reversing light that's damaged and has been covered in tape. That's OK because it's not non-testable and there's no sharp edges. But there's a rear fog lamp out on the near side. But I seem to remember that only one's required anyway.
Yeah, well remembered. The requirement is for one lamp fitted to the centre or the offside of the vehicle, and it only applies to vehicles that were first used on or after the 1st of April 1980.
So if there was a rear fog lamp fitted to a vehicle first used before then, it would be non-testable?
Yeah, correct, because the check only applies to mandatory rear fog lamps.
And what about if a non-mandatory fog lamp had a cracked lens and was showing white light to the rear? Would that be a fail?
No, because it's not a testable light. They're classed as additional lamps, and we don't test them. Same as if it was a reversing light stuck on. We just pass and advise.
One last thing, it doesn't apply to this vehicle, but if it had a high-level stop light, I know that if it's a multi-source light, that at least 50% of the light sources need to be working. But isn't there something also about proving that it's wired up?
Well, this applies to all additional stop lamps. They're only testable if they're fitted and connected. So if there's any doubt as to whether it's wired up, we give the benefit of doubt to the presenter and simply pass and advise.
Great, let's carry on. OK, now, Brian, I've got myself into a bit of a muddle here as to which items I need to check with the engine running.
So you must remember that you need to check the braking system with and without the brakes being applied, and that would normally require the engine running for most vehicles to ensure full servo effect or full pressure for a power braking system.
So I need to get my assistant either applying the brakes or use a brake pedal application tool?
Yeah, quite right. And as you mentioned, the brake pedal application tool, that can be used in all cases.
And we also need to check for fuel leaks with and without the engine running?
Yeah, spot on, correct.
And what about the power steering?
Yeah, we need the engine running for all power steering checks and for all checks that require steering movement where power steering's fitted.
OK, let's do it.
All right, I'll get in and be your assistant. Now you've got the vehicle on unlocked turn plates. What do you think are the most common errors with using these?
Well, one must be doing the lock-to-lock check without using the turn plates.
Yeah, they tend to do it on hard standing, which may be OK for Class 5s, even though they should use turn plates if they've got them, but they must use them for Class 4s, and it states that in Section 2.2 of the manual.
And the turning plates must move freely, and I know that that's often not the case.
Yeah, it doesn't take much to keep them greased and oiled, does it? And you'd also be surprised how many times I've seen people do the play under load checks on unlocked turn plates.
So the steering's under hardly any load at all?
Yeah, so it's unlikely to show any play in ball joints. And another aspect of incorrect turn plate use is when carrying out the checks to the front suspension under Section 2.5b of the manual.
What's that, then?
I've seen many testers grasp the wheel at the 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock position and rock it like that. Well, that's not right. What it says in the manual is shake it in and out like that.
And doesn't the assistant have to carry out this check while the tester observes the suspension components?
That's right. This is also the case when using a bar under the road wheel. Tester uses the bar to check for movement, then gets the assistant to use the bar while the tester observes the steering and suspension components.
And I know for many components the play has to be excessive for it to fail. What do we mean by excessive?
Well, it has to be obvious that the component has reached a stage where it needs repair, replacement or adjustment at the time of test. And if there's any doubt, it's a pass and advise. What are you doing?
I'm checking the inner steering rack joints.
No, that's not the way to do that. Many testers are testing them by that method. You can't see the joint, you don't know what type of joint it is, the vehicle's not in its running position. They cannot be failed for wear by using that method of inspection.
So how do you check them, Brian?
Right, if they are bad, there's likely to be excessive free play in the steering and measured at the steering wheel, and that's the correct method of inspection and the correct reason for ejection.
And if unsure, pass and advise?
Yes, correct, spot on.
OK.
Are you checking the drive shaft?
I am, Brian, but I obviously can't see the joints because of the gaiters, but it might make a noise, and I'm also checking to see if the gaiters are split at either end.
Well, you're right to check the inner drive shaft joint, but if the inner drive shaft gaiter was split, do you think that'd be a foul?
I should think so.
No, wrong again, mate. Not testable. It's just a pass and advise.
What if there's a rear drive shaft?
Right, it would only be testable if it formed part of the suspension, as with the old Triumph Herald. And again, the drive shaft would be testable, but the gaiters would not. If it didn't form part of the suspension, then any defect on it would be a pass and advise.
So if the rear drive shaft isn't part of the suspension and there's a fault, it's just a pass and advise?
Yeah, correct, yeah.
OK, with it jacked up, it's a good time to look at the tyres, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. You need to check the standards in the manual because there's two sets of standards depending on what type of vehicle you're testing.
And that can lead to mistakes?
Yeah, well, a common mistake is that a lot of testers think that a tyre on a car needs tread across the whole breadth of the tyre. Well, it doesn't. It needs tread across the central three-quarters of the tyre and around the entire circumference.
And cuts and probing can cause confusion too?
Yes, they can. And we went to great lengths in our recent tyre DVD to explain that in detail. And another issue is step tread.
What's that?
Well, that's where some grooves are not cut as deep as others because they're designed to wear out first. They're not classed as part of the tread pattern. Really need to look for the grooves that have got tread wear indicators in them. And we explain that in detail as well on our recent tyre DVD. So that's it for tyres. Let's move on to brakes. All right?
Yeah, the roller brake test seems pretty straightforward to me. Brian, what are the issues?
Well, the main problem is the tester's misunderstanding of the criteria for the rate of increase and the rate of decrease.
Do you think that's because there's no specified figure like there is for imbalance?
Oh, almost certainly, yeah. We're at that point in the test now, so let's run through it. If you give me the control, I'll work the rollers and you can do the test, yeah?
So I gradually apply the service brake and watch how the gauges increase, and I take it to a point just before wheel slip. And then I gradually reduce the service brake and watching how the braking effort at both wheels reduces. That's it. So stop the brake and stop the rollers.
That's it. Good job, mate. But apart from imbalance, what other aspects are you checking?
Well, as we gradually apply the service brake, the gauges start to rise, and we'd expect them to rise at roughly the same rate rather than, say, one increasing, the other decreasing or not moving.
That's it. And it's the same for the rate of decrease. And it's important to remember that that check is carried out on the front and the rear, whereas imbalance only applies to the front. And imbalance is checked on the rate of increase, not the rate of decrease.
Yeah, so theoretically it could stay within the imbalance criteria but fail on the rate of increase or decrease.
Oh, it certainly could, yeah. Now, finish up here and then we'll get on to enter the test results.
OK. What about the emissions test, Brian? We've not done that.
Well, there aren't any particular issues with emission testing, Rob, on either petrol or diesels, so there's no point in getting you to go through it. One thing you haven't checked, though, is the fuel cap seal.
I did that in the pre-checks.
Ah, yeah, but you have to do it as part of the test, regardless. Don't forget somebody else may have done your pre-checks for you.
Of course.
Right, let's go to the VTS device and enter the test results.
OK.
Do you spot he missed the cap? OK, we're back at the VTS device, so let's assume we've failed the vehicle and we're going to carry out the repairs.
So it could be a PRS as long as we can effect the repairs within an hour?
It could, but the important thing here is that the repairs and the retest must be carried out before a VT20 is issued. A common mistake is that testers think they can issue the VT20 before the repairs are done on the basis that the vehicle's staying on the premises.
Well, it clearly makes sense that a VT20 should never be issued until a vehicle reaches the MOT standard. What about a partial retest, Brian? Does that have to be carried out by the same tester?
Well, that's the preferred way, but it can be done by any tester at the same VTS within 10 working days of the original inspection. Whoever does the retest must check all the items that failed, plus any testable advisories that may have further deteriorated since the original inspection, and any other items that would have been affected by the repair work.
So if the vehicle failed for, say, a braking defect, then it would be necessary to carry out another brake performance test?
Exactly. The tester would need to consider all items that have been affected by the repair work. And let's say, for example, it failed for excessively warm brake pads. Well, what items do you think you need to recheck?
Well, clearly the pads, the discs, the calipers, then there'd be wheel security, and also whether the wheels had been put on the right side if it had asymmetrical tyres.
Yeah, all good points. And don't forget, you'd have to carry out another brake performance test.
What if the tester found a defect that stopped them carrying out a brake test? Do they just put zeros in the boxes on the brake performance results screen?
That's another common mistake. Putting in zeros or crosses or anything like that is not the way to do it.
OK, so what should they do?
Well, the correct procedure would be to abandon the test, which I can select on there. Now, I get the option to abandon or abort. If it's something wrong with the vehicle, I need to abandon it. So I'll select abandon. My reason for abandoning it is because the brake pads are worn out. I may cause damage. So I'll put that there, and I'll just put a brief message into there to say brake performance not carried out. Now I'll continue. I'll enter the mileage. I found worn out brake pads, so that's a reason for ejection, so I need to enter that. So I'll go to brakes, hub components, brake pads. All right, so my failure is less than 1.5 mil thick. So I'll click failure. Near side. Front. Yes, I think it's dangerous. Continue. I need to fail the other side. Offside. Front. Yes, I think it's dangerous. Continue. I'll look at the summary of my results. That's what I'm failing it for. I've not done a brake test. Now, because I've gone down the correct route, abandon test, it's given me the extra option that's not usually there. I can continue and bypass it. Now I'll tell it abandon, and I'll accept the results. That's the correct way to do it, not go down different routes and put zeros and crosses into the boxes.
So what do we do on the VTS device if we've done a retest?
Right, so on the register vehicle first screen, there's a drop-down box to decide what type of test we're doing. If we used a drop-down box, then we've got different options for retest, whether it was left at the VTS or it's gone away or it's minor items. There's also the option for a tester to use fast-track retest for any partial retest that doesn't involve measured items.
Has anyone ever done a test, entered it on the VTS device and then discovered that that actually entered the details of the wrong vehicle?
Well, unfortunately, it's happened many times, mate, which highlights the importance of being careful in collecting and entering the vehicle data rather than taking the information from a job card.
And what can the tester do to put it right?
Well, the AE would need to contact the local VOSA area office, but don't worry, we understand these things happen. What's important is that we don't end up with two vehicle records on the system, one being incorrect.
Of course. Brian, thanks ever so much for your guidance today. Overall, I haven't made a very good tester, have I?
Not to worry, mate. You've helped show up a few common mistakes and confusing issues.
I hope so. I'll try better next time.
Well, if I was you, I wouldn't give up your day job, Robin. You might want to put that on your back on your way.
Nice one, Brian. I'm sure I'll be back.